Welcome to News 9 Plus special coverage from Raisina Dialogue. I've got with me Mr. Sviatoslav Yurash, the youngest Ukrainian MP. So my first question, obviously, you've been at the front line of this war that has been raging for about a year. How do you see this is going about? Because there's obviously a stalemate that has been set in now.
Well, it's not a stalemate, to be honest with you. We fought the Russians first around the capital. We beat them back from our capital. Then we beat them back from north of the country, liberating north of our country, which is bordering Russia. Then we beat them around the second biggest city, and there was a place where many Indian students went to study, Kharkiv. We liberated that area. Then we liberated the only regional capital. They captured the south of the country, and a good chunk of the south of the country as well. Now the Russians are trying to continue attacking and advancing, but they cannot take one single city. I mean, the point is that we in this fight are battling for the one simple fact, so the Ukrainians can decide the future of Ukraine. Until Russia leaves us alone, that's the only thing we ever wanted, for Russia to leave us alone. We will not stop defending our destiny.
Russia keeps on claiming that, before the war, they were repeatedly warning, the NATO countries, telling Ukraine, don't join NATO because you are then crossing a so-called red line. So is that red line really sensible? Or if you go back and think, was there a way with talks to get out of this situation which we are right now?
Well, first, the general point. I mean, the reality is Russia is using all these excuses for one simple fact: Russian imperialism. Russian vision for itself is an imperial power. It meddles not just in Ukraine, it meddles in Asia. And what they've done in Syria is unspeakable. What is done in Africa, unspeakable. And what it's doing is in South America as well. Russia is a power that pretends that it's an empire. It wants to bring back the old notions of empire, colonialism, and what it does in Ukraine is a pure example of that. It claims that we don't have a right to choose our future, that they can take that right away from us by invading our country, killing our people, destroying our cities. We are showing to them that we will fight back.
But NATO, they've been supplying you weapons, but is it enough? That's the biggest question.
To explain NATO, it's very basic and simple mathematics. There are countries like us in the Soviet Union, or Baltic states. These countries have Russian minorities. These countries have many questions about their future as well, and they border Russia. And these countries were not invaded, destroyed, were not occupied because they are in NATO. NATO is an alliance which allows member states to feel safe. Our country wants to feel safe as well. And as we saw with Russian invasion 24th of February, we don't have that option until we become part of the Western alliance that gives us that security that our former members of Soviet Union have.
So coming to the ground reality, there is an obvious appeal from Ukrainian for getting supply of weapons, a continuous supply of weapons. There is also this issue of supplying jets, because all that requires a lot of investment in terms of not just money but also manpower. So do you on ground have enough firepower to sustain this continuous war that is going on right now?
We have been showing clearly that we have the will to sustain this battle, to fight on until Russians leave us alone. Second, as far as the request for fighter jets, tanks and everything else, it's about the fact that we don't want to use what Russians are using, that is sacrificing thousands of their people, storming the barricades with nothing like the First World War. What we want to do is to liberate our country and create peace, because at that point when Russia leaves our borders and leaves our country to us, there will be peace. So the point is, these are instruments of peace. The point is, we want to liberate our country, and to liberate it and not to use Russian tactics of murdering your country in the meantime, we need those instruments. And we've been very blessed that the West has been advancing in that regard. But it's not just the military means that are in discussion here. And India has been forthcoming in supplying humanitarian aid that Ukraine needs, because we have from 8 to 10 million people that have been displaced within the country or outside the country. And we have countless houses destroyed, schools destroyed. I'll tell you, for example, we have in Kiev, the capital of our country, we had a school of Oriental languages, but it's an old name. But the fact is, they were studying Hindi there and all that. That school was destroyed when the attack on Kiev was happening, when Russia was shooting missiles at the city. And I'm glad to say that India has taken charge there in restoring that school. And I'm very thankful for the Indian role in general in this conversation, because the fact that Prime Minister Modi has said to Mr. Putin that war is not something that should happen in a century is fundamental to us.
You have worked very closely with President Zelensky for about 3-4 years now. How do you see the characters of his leadership vis-a-vis when politics was going on. There was a lot of neo-Nazi issues that have been raised about. And now, in wartime, how has he been, working as a president?
I mean, first, all the claims about any kind of Nazi, anything else is a blatant lie. The reality is President Zelensky is Jewish, and he's the first Jewish Ukrainian president, and we, during our tenure in the parliament, passed a law on anti-Semitism. So any claim of any kind of Nazi connections or anything else is just a delusion. The fact is, Ukraine is a democratic country, which has different sides. We have far right, we have far left, we have everything in the middle. We have them discussing, debating, and trying to figure out the future of the country. No party that espouses any far right perspectives has ever won any elections whatsoever. And the reality is that what we want is a simple thing that every country wants, especially India: liberty, prosperity, and freedom. And we want that for Ukraine, and Russia doesn't allow that to us.
If we can throw a insight on how President Zelensky has been working in this tough conditions.
Certainly,
right now.
I'm sorry, I was distracted by
Sure.
all these Russian claims about any kind of Nazi-esque influence of any
course.
sorts. The fact is Mr. Zelensky has proven himself to be this crucial character to the story. He has made a choice to stand his ground. We are proud of that. We are proud that our leader didn't run away. We saw what happened in Afghanistan. We saw the fact that leadership has utterly given up on the country and how the country breaks down. We here in Ukraine are proud that our leader, at the moment of greatest need, a moment of greatest desire of security, has stayed his ground and kept the whole government running from our capital, keeping our ancient capital in our hands, not allowing Russia any claims to it whatsoever.
India has been, telling both countries that war is not an option. But at the same time, India has not overtly, obviously, given support for either of the side. Is that an issue for the Ukrainian side?
I must say that the issue for us is just the lack of activity that we have done through the years as far as Indo-Pacific region is concerned in general. Sadly, we're not engaged enough. And I think my visit here now for the Russian Dialogue and for the Young Fellows program of the Russian Dialogue is one of those steps, trying to establish and further the communication between our two nations, because we have so much that we can talk about and share. Our battle against the colonial past is what we're discussing now, because our fight against Russia is nothing but a fight against the old imperial master trying to reinstate their colony as they see it. We will not allow it, as India has not allowed it when it built its independence and its future. So as far as the connections between India and Ukraine, they will only further.
One last question for you. What does Ukraine expect from India as of now in this war
the reality
condition?
is that India has been evolving its stance towards Ukraine step by step. The comments by Prime Minister Modi to Mr. Putin, the clear support on humanitarian direction that India has paid, the incredible attention of Indian media to what's happening in Ukraine, the reality of the engagement, gradual but still steady, as far as the support for the basic notions of national law, for the UN Charter, that borders don't change, they don't invade other countries, is something that we need when discussing what the future of the world should be, and we take our story and tell that to every country in the world. That's something that could happen if you give up on the basic fundamental human rights.
So as a very young politician, how did your worldview on issues have changed over time in the past 1 year?
In the past 1 year, there was everything. The reality is I mobilized very early on to fight around Kiev because I lost somebody very dear and near to me. She was a journalist killed by Russian artillery along with other American journalists. And the fact is that made me want to fight the Russians in person. And I joined the platoon of a territorial defense force around our capital. I fought first around Kiev, but then our platoon was sent to the trenches. I fought there, and before that and after that, I was running humanitarian convoys to the places which are in flames and are basically in the midst of a battle with the Russians. So I saw much of that horror firsthand, and I can tell you that to me it is an example of something that can never be imagined. It could not be imagined by me when growing up, but it's something that we need to fight and we need to stop.
Thank you, MP Sviatoslav, for speaking to News 9+.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.